406.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 411 from 406. My name is Chewie, and I am joined once again by my brother from another mother, Mr. Pip. How are you, sir?
I am in such a good mood tonight. This is, it feels like we haven't talked in like a year and a half, which is strange.
It is strange, and you're right. It's been a long time, and I will have to apologize because that is primarily because of my schedule that we have not been able to get together and get to this podcast that quite frankly has been on the agenda. Like we knew this is what we were going to talk about next, right? This is the third in a series. We are doing a deep dive into the Star Wars sequel trilogy. We started a couple episodes ago with The Force Awakens, and then we rolled into The Last Jedi. And tonight we are doing a deep dive into the Rise of Skywalker, which I am really, really excited about.
So is it fair to call this the rubber match? Because I feel like is it fair to say that we both liked The Force Awakens and then both sort of a little bit sour on The Last Jedi? And then this one is this the make or break? Is this the Matrix 3? Is this the one that determines whether this whole trilogy was worth it to begin with?
I hope it's not the Matrix 3, but I think that's I think that's a pretty good analogy, right? I mean, we've got one movie that I guess would be a thumbs up, and one that would be a thumbs down. And yeah, I mean, I don't know that this third movie is going to make or break the entire trilogy for me. We'll certainly get into that. But yeah, I think I'm really interested in this conversation and this discussion because, you know, you and I have certainly talked about this movie since it came out, but I don't know that we've ever sat down and really, really gotten into the goods, the bads, and the uglies, of which there are all three in this movie. So I'm pumped to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm super psyched. This is it's been a long time coming, and to your point, I'm not sure that we've had casual conversations about this, but to have a really good deep dive, I think it's going to be interesting because, you know, it's fair to say we were pretty critical of the last movie, The Last Jedi. And it will be interesting to see how we both treat this movie, because I think, you know, not to play my hand a little too quickly, but I think this movie is immensely flawed. There's a lot of stuff that's not great about this movie, but for some reason, before I get to the end of it, I'm forgiving a lot of the flaws. I'm letting a lot of this stuff slide because I find myself, for the most part, having a really good time. Like, I don't think it's a great movie. I think there's, just like The Last Jedi, I think the Pee-wee's word of the day was contrivances. We said that word a whole lot, but you know, and there's going to be a lot of that here. But for some reason, I don't know if it's the spirit that JJ brings to this or what it is, but I just find myself enjoying the ride, no matter kind of where they take us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if there's another word, if contrivances was one of the words of the day for that movie, the other word is boring, and that word doesn't come up in my mind for this movie. I think that's part of the difference. There's just not, you know, the Canto Bite scene in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. It just makes zero sense. There's a lot that doesn't make sense, but there's not a really boring scene. I mean, remember that, you know, The Last Jedi really revolved around the bad guys waiting for the good guys to literally run out of gas. And there's nothing, even though there's some contrivances here, there's nothing quite that boring. So,
well, you're hitting it right on the head, right out of the gate here. There's no room to be boring, because this movie, which clocks in at about 2 hours and 22 minutes, is incredibly fast paced, and they have a lot of things crammed in here. A lot of it, which, you know, arguably could have been cut, but, you know, they don't give you a chance to really just sit around and wonder where this is going, because they are hopping from planet to planet, MacGuffin to MacGuffin the whole time. There's a lot going on in this film.
Yeah, and and I don't know if that is, well, I mean, it has to be. It's JJ coming back into the franchise and trying to fix what Rian Johnson did, again, in his eyes. We had a long discussion about whether or not we agreed with what Rian Johnson did and the chances he took and those kind of things. I think it's probably fair to say, though, that JJ is here trying to get this trilogy across the finish line and trying to, again, fix what he thinks Ryan broke. Again, which some of the, we're going to talk about how successful he was at that. I think there are parts here that I think he was really, really successful at. There's a couple scenes here that, there's two scenes here in particular that I can think of that I get goosebumps every single time I watch them. And then there's some stuff where you're just kind of shaking your head, as we get into it. And again, if you're just now joining this particular retrospective series, I would urge you to go back and listen to the first two episodes. I have to give huge major thanks and props to Pip. He kind of goes through and he comes up with the format of these shows, and then I get to kind of react like the meathead that I am. So thank you in advance again. But one thing I will say just at the top here is one of the things that I think we were both pretty critical of in The Last Jedi is some of the comedy that was in there really took us out of the film. And there's really not much of that here, at least that I can remember. There might be one scene and one character in particular, but it wasn't the funny ha-ha where you're sitting and looking in the theater going, well, what just happened? There's no mom jokes here like there was in The Last Jedi, which is a marketed improvement in my eyes. Would you like to kind of how do you want to do this? You want to walk us through a plot, or you just kind of launch in the way you've done in previous episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and get started then. So we'll kick things off with a scroll, which is how all the Star Wars movies start, and this will be our last scroll that we review. But we see right away that Emperor Palpatine is back, and he's looking to exact revenge. Kylo is hunting him down for some reason, which is a theme of the Sith, to be threatened by their own power. So our first shot is going to be of Kylo laying waste to a bunch of creatures on a red lava planet that we will learn only, I believe, in the novelization that this is actually the planet Mustafar, which is the former home of Darth Vader, previously seen in both Revenge of the Sith and Rogue One. And I thought that was really interesting that they started here, and there's an entire subplot that's completely abandoned. If you either read the book or I believe it is explained to some degree on some of the behind the scenes featurettes. I have to think that it's only for time, which makes good sense, again, because this is a 2.5-hour movie. But we get right to the point after some slow motion action where we see Kylo retrieve one of the many MacGuffins in this movie, which is the Sith Wayfinder. And immediately, out of the gate, I think we're all a little confused because I don't know what this is. I don't know what this does. And they're not really telling us anything right away. It just seems to be something that he's after. And it seems to be a different focus from what we've seen previously.
Yeah, this is the best analogy that I can give here is this is the spark. This is the Matrix from the Michael Bay Transformers movies, right? It's like this thing that we've never heard of. It has never been, for lack of a better term, canon in anything we've ever heard of, at least up till this point. Maybe now, I don't know. And yeah, even then, it was okay. That's kind of weird. And as you sit down and you watch a movie in your mid 40s, immediately kind of what this is, right? This is the MacGuffin. This is what we're going to kind of be chasing after, and this is what's going to move the plot forward. I will say that as I watched it on opening night specifically, I recognized that that's what it was, but I was willing to give it a pass because A, I wasn't super thrilled with the way The Last Jedi ended, and B, this opening scene was really kind of cool, right? This is just it's showing the badass version of Kylo Ren, which I really like.
Absolutely. And it sort of continues a theme that I think has been the most consistent through this entire franchise, which is it's gorgeous. It looks really cool. It's very visually appealing. The cinematography is really, really cool. And it carries on into this next scene where Kylo steers his fighter through this crazy looking cosmic storm to find his way to a very dark and stormy planet that we're going to learn is called Exegol. And we waste no time here reintroducing Emperor Palpatine back into the trilogy. And I don't know how you feel about this. I know that this was a very polarizing idea for this movie, but I loved it. I mean, there's virtually no context behind his return, and I'm sure that's just fodder for extended universe, or I guess it's not called extended universe, but other stories. At this point, they'll rewrite some of the history, which I don't know if they've done to this point. I don't know if they've recanonized what happened with the Emperor and why he came back. But I should not forgive the movie for this, but I do, just because I think that the Emperor is one of my favorite characters ever, which I'm pretty sure was in a previous podcast that we did. But I just love the fact that he was back, and I didn't care. It didn't bother me that we don't know why or how.
No, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think it's probably because we are the age that we are, and we have the connection to the original trilogy that we do.
Yes.
That we were so excited to see this version of Palpatine on the screen. I don't know that we've ever talked about it. I wasn't a huge fan of Senator Palpatine in the prequels, but I was always a big fan of Emperor Palpatine. And again, it's the same character. And I think that's probably partially to do with the fact that, I grew up with the original trilogy. Emperor Palpatine was always the big bad in Return of, he was obviously in Star Wars and Empire. And then, we saw him really in Jedi. No, I was not unhappy at all. I loved the way he was introduced here. The look of him. It is very, there's lightning. It was very reminiscent of the way Kylo Ren was introduced in the original film. It's almost got kind of a horror vibe to it, actually even more of a horror vibe than that one did.
Good call.
He's got around his eyes, he's got a lot of black around his eyes. It's almost, if you've ever seen when they reintroduced Michael Myers in the newest Halloween movie, it's flashes and it's cuts, and you're seeing just bits and pieces of his face. Clearly know who it is very quickly, but it is a scary version of Emperor Palpatine. And if you're gonna bring a character back timeline wise 30 years later, you really kind of need to up that ante of, oh shit, this is a really, really badass. And I think they did that when they introduced him, even though you really didn't even see him, right? You didn't realize that he was, later on in the movie, you will learn that he is kind of held together by some machinery and an arm. He's not really walking and those kind of things, but that doesn't matter when you first introduce him here. He is the big bad that, quite frankly, we've been waiting for this entire trilogy. We didn't get it with Snoke. We really haven't had it with Kylo Ren. This is the big bad that we've been waiting for.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I realize and recognize that I am a flaming hypocrite for getting behind this and liking this, because it is also a very terrible contrivance, the way that they do it, right? Like, they could have done it a little bit better. They could have given it more context, more explanation. I don't think they had time to do it based off of everything else they want to cram in this film. But it's not good storytelling by any means, but I just didn't care, because I just felt like I was back in the seat for the last time, and I was just really enjoying it. And probably, again, because they're catering to my fanboy desires, which is to spend more time with the characters from the original trilogy. I'm engaged. At this point, I'm going with whatever they're going to give us. So,
yep, agreed.
We learn that Palpatine actually made Snoke, right? So we see, if we look in the background of when Kylo's kind of working his way to the Emperor, we see some of these like back to tank looking things. They must be some sort of cloning facilities, and we see old decrepit versions of Snoke in there if you look close enough. So it's really interesting. We get a total geek out moment where we hear some new dialogue from James Earl Jones for a half a second as Darth Vader, which is really neat. But as part of this, Palpatine offers Kylo a new empire, and out of nowhere raises a huge fleet of planet-killing Star Destroyers from the clouds or from the ground or something. And he says that the fleet will soon be ready, but I'm not exactly sure what we're waiting on. Like, that part was a little bit. It seemed like a contrived way to just put a doomsday clock in the background to give us a timer, to give us something to care about. Now, I won't call it a theory, but I've got an alternate sort of ending to this movie that I want to present to you when all of this is over, because I've got some ideas that I think would have tightened this up a little bit better. But for some reason, they're just like, oh yeah, in X number of hours, we're going to have our fleet ready and we're gonna bust them out of here. But we're going to have to wait a little while to get the good guys a chance to assemble their forces.
Yeah, I could not wrap my head around the timing of any of this. Right, the last movie, we've got an entire movie which presumably takes place in about 8 hours, and now we've got a fleet full of like fully functioning spaceships and the entire fleet of captains and generals and whatever that are like ready, but have just been hanging out for like 30 something years. It makes zero sense.
It's weird, and it's not good. It's not. No. It's I get that they're trying to build up this. The bad guys are completely overwhelming with their numbers and their artillery and all this thing, this sort of motif, but I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah,
and again, and I get that, but it's like, why would this big badass army just be kind of waiting around for 30 years? It literally makes no sense. Right. Zero.
Especially when every single one of them has a planet-killing weapon. And there's unlimited, like, I feel like if you take 3 of them out there, you'll be fine, right? Like, you don't need 9,000 of these things. You just need like 3 or 4, and you can go kick a lot of ass. But nevertheless, that's kind of what we have here. So Palpatine tells Ren that Rey is not who you think she is, which will be the first of many attempts to sort of retcon a lot of the Rian Johnson storytelling, right? Because we're gonna touch on this a lot, I think, through this podcast, but Rian Johnson spent some time kind of trying to retell some of the things that JJ did in Force Awakens, and then JJ's going to come in and sort of go back and retcon and retell some of the stuff that Rian Johnson did, and this is just kind of step 1 of that, because obviously the big conversation piece around Force Awakens is who are Rey's parents. And I think Rian Johnson did a lot in the second movie to say, it doesn't matter, we don't care. Now JJ's back and he says, oh yeah, no, actually we do care. But it's not our parents that we care about.
Real quick, before we move on, we mentioned Snoke is a clone. And we've talked, we're going to talk about Rey. At this point of the movie, were you thinking this is Palpatine? Or is this a clone of Palpatine? Is it like Bob Palpatine, his brother? Like, who is this? Right. Is this the character that we know? I wasn't sure.
I thought no. I thought that it was not, because I didn't really feel like there was any plausible storytelling device that could convince us that he survived what happened in Return of the Jedi. So I assumed it had to be a clone. I didn't know how or what. Who made him? I don't know how and when they had a cloning facility available to them. I don't know what the cloning science is in the Star Wars universe. Like, do they have to have a strand of his hair for DNA or something weird like that? Because clearly they didn't, that wasn't a thing. So I don't know how. I'm sure they'll come back and tell us the story through some graphic novels or maybe a TV show at some point. But yeah, I think I knew we were dealing with a clone, but I didn't know. They haven't really expanded on how the science behind all that is supposed to work, right? Like, so if this is a clone of somebody's physical DNA, then how does he have the Force, or how does that work? Is it a midi-chlorian thing, right? That was a big new thing that was unveiled in the first trilogy that sort of got mentioned in this trilogy, but they didn't really go too far into it. I think it was brought up in maybe in Force Awakens or something. I don't know, but yeah. So I think I knew that, but I didn't have time to think about it. They didn't give me any opportunity, because we fly right back into the storyline that now involves our heroes from the earlier movies, and the Millennium Falcon is screaming through hyperspace on her way, according to the scroll, to get some intelligence, which seems a little weird. And there's going to be a lot of holes to poke in this, but we get some great visuals on this ice planet, structure, again, like so gorgeous. Like this movie is so much fun to look at, and some really fun space battles where we see Poe and Finn, together again, and there's this buddy vibe that I feel like really not only is reminiscent of The Force Awakens, but it really builds on that relationship, which is cool. And I'm really starting to love it at this point, seeing these characters, back in this adventure. But I got to say, one thing that I'm not a fan of is the story idea here, where why exactly do we have to fly to a planet and run a physical cable to transfer a message, other than to create an excuse for a really fun space battle? Like I guess I don't care because it's fun and it looks really good, but is this stupid? Like, did we not have cell phones? Did we not have an ability to transfer a message? Like, what was the physical message that had to be transferred here?
This is remarkably stupid. Yes,
okay,
I mean,
cool.
it's just.
I'm glad you said
yes,
that.
yeah. Yes, it is the epitome of contrived. Yes, I'm not going to bother to belabor the point. It's remarkably stupid. Yes.
Again, I'm leaning towards not caring, just because they're flying through the air. We're having so much fun. The Millennium Falcon continues to be the unsung hero of this entire franchise, because it's just great to see it back. But at this point, we're introduced into another new theory in space travel, which I think is really interesting: light speed skipping. And again, I'm not really sure of the point, but it's really cool to watch. And the TIE fighters, which now apparently have light speed capabilities, is that a new thing? Has that been introduced to this point?
That is 100% a new thing. Yes.
Okay. They're light speed skipping with the Falcon, which I can only assume means they're tracking the Falcon via light speed skipping, right? Because how else would they do that? Which that was established in the previous movie. But then Rey's, she's doing some training in the forest with Leia, so we kind of cut back to a very Return of the Jedi kind of vibe, where she's floating around and she's trying to hone her skills and trying to make contact with the Jedi that came for her. And, not to jump too far ahead, but, I'm wondering, like, do we really need this? Like, would it have been too much of a problem to just have it be about her trying to contact Luke and try to figure out how to deal with Kylo? Like, why is she trying to summon the entire Jedi family, for lack of a better term? I mean, it makes for a fun moment at the end of the movie. I think that's really maybe what it does. It just sets up the finale, right? But I just don't know if I get it. Like, why is she doing this at this point?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think one is, yes, it's 100% for the end. Spoiler alert, they all show up at the end. But I'm guessing too, this is probably some of the only relevant footage that they had of Carrie Fisher. And so they're like, oh, well, if we're gonna kind of try to pigeonhole her in, I'm guessing. I don't know. I would agree. You could probably cut most of this Leia stuff out of here. Again, I think in the last episode, I said I would have taken the opportunity to kill that character, Leia. Then I know that you were a big fan of seeing her and Luke together, as was I. But yeah, most of the Leia stuff here, I can kind of do without, with the exception of the one scene later with her and Luke, which I think is a CGI flashback, which I think is very well done. But most of the Rey stuff here, yeah, I could kind of do without.
Yeah, so we didn't really touch on that before we started, but the big question going into this movie was, how were they going to handle the untimely death of Carrie Fisher, aka Princess Leia, because they did not kill her character in The Last Jedi. But obviously the actress could not be here to reprise her role. So what were they going to do? And that was a really interesting question. And, I suppose we can get to it at some point, but I will say that I think the decision to not do a completely CGI character was a smart one. They did that with Tarkin, and they did that with Princess Leia in Rogue One, but they did it very liberally, I guess I should say. Like, they didn't overdo it, which was good. And there wasn't a way to not overdo it with what they decided to do with her character in this movie. But I will say that I think they did a really good job with what they had. They took a lot of footage that was deleted or eventually not used from The Force Awakens, and they repurposed it and sort of wrote some of this beginning storyline around the dialogue that they had from her in the first movie. And while some of it may be a little bit clunky, if you were going to have these same scenes but actually have Carrie Fisher alive to do them, the dialogue would be much different and it would be much better. But for what they did, I thought it was good. And I thought it was, when we get to the point where she does die in this movie, it was really impressive that they got her that far and gave her that treatment. And it didn't feel too forced for, I didn't think so. I thought that they did a pretty good job with that without trying to get too far ahead of us.
No, I would agree with that. For what they had to work with, which wasn't much and was, reshoots or cutting room floor stuff from a previous movie. If you didn't know that, you might not know that, you know what I mean? Like that those scenes weren't a part of this movie. If you didn't know the backstory of Carrie Fisher, you may not know that she wasn't there as this movie was being shot, which is really the best compliment that I can give. I think that's a long way of saying I'm agreeing with what you're saying. I think they did a very beyond admirable job of cutting together footage and creating this character and this subplot for this movie based on previous stuff, which presumably was never going to be Princess Leia's journey, right? Presumably, if Rian Johnson had any sort of an idea, or JJ or whatever, I don't think it would have been this.
I don't think it was going to be her journey, but I do think this was going to be her movie because for whatever reason, and I don't agree with this on any level, but when JJ was originally brought in, my understanding is that he sort of pitched this as that each character from the original trilogy would have their own movie, essentially. So Force Awakens was clearly Han's movie, and that was JJ's vision there. The second movie was supposed to be about Luke Skywalker, which is kind of what Rian Johnson continued. And then the third movie was supposed to be about Leia. I personally don't agree with that. Like that lineup doesn't make sense to me. I think it's fine if you want to have Han come back to that first movie and then kill him. That's cool. But Star Wars has always been about Luke Skywalker for me. And if you're going to give each person their own movie, I think it should have ended with Luke and not that should not have been the middle. That shouldn't have not have been chapter 2. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I agree. Yeah, the Star Wars saga, and we'll call it the Skywalker Saga. Mm-hmm. That's Luke's story. Always has been, always will be in my eyes. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So that was a miss, but so Kylo somehow interrupts her training, Rey's training, and reintroduces the flashbacks of her being left back on Jakku. So right away we're going to go back and revisit that mythology that JJ created earlier. And Rey decides to give Luke's lightsaber, which I guess is fixed. Did we not get any? I don't know where we got some super Jedi glue. That she apparently repaired it, but she didn't think she earned it, so she gave it back to Leia. And then we see a quick cameo by the sacred Jedi texts, which appear to be explaining the Wayfinder. That's our exposition there when the Falcon returns, and we see a heated exchange between Rey and Poe, with the point of friction seemingly that she's training to be a Jedi while her friends are out fighting. And the message from the First Order spy confirms that somehow Palpatine returns, which honestly, it's just, it's really bad that they had to go through all that just to find out that Palpatine returns.
Well, it is. It's really bad, and I don't remember what's the time frame between The Last Jedi and this movie. Do we know? Is it years?
No, okay. I don't think so. I don't know exactly. That's a great question. I should have.
Well, and I guess the reason I ask is, so in between the first two movies, it's like literally minutes, right? It just picks up. Mm-hmm. But if you remember at the end of The Last Jedi, there's like 7 rebels left. There's none of them. They're all in the Falcon.
I have to think it's maybe a matter of months.
Okay.
Maybe a month, maybe a couple months, because they've had a chance to regroup somehow and grow their numbers a little bit.
I guess my point, and we touched on it earlier, it's like if there's literally 7, 10, 12, 25, whatever it is, enough people that can fit in the Falcon, that's the mm-hmm. that is the whole of the resistance at the end of that movie. Do we really need 9,000 planet-killing ships to kill 25 rebels? I mean, talk about overkill. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like killing a fly with a bazooka.
It is, right? I mean, it's literally like Kylo at the end of The Last Jedi. More.
Right. unload every gun you have on that one guy down
there. Right. So anyway, sorry.
No, I agree 100%. I think there's a lot of really bad storytelling here that just exists to push everything forward, but that's what we must do. So we get our first cameo by Dominic Monaghan, who is more known for Lost and Lord of the Rings. And he drops the line that dark science and cloning is the explanation behind the Emperor's return, which is the only thing we're going to get. You know, that's I think the only way that we know that the Emperor was a clone. It's a dropped line, and you know, as much as I would like to go more into why that's a thing, and I feel like they could have spent that time there if they would have cut a bunch of the crap out. That's not what we get in this movie. So we just kind of have to kind of move on. And then Rey determines that finding Exegol, which Luke had apparently been trying to do previously, is the next move so that our heroes can decide to take this journey together to get to the deserts of Pasaana, which apparently is not Tatooine or Jakku, but we will get back to a desert planet, which is where Luke's trail went cold. So we'll talk more about that a little bit. And then we see a cameo from Rose. She makes one of her 5-second cameos, and Finn pats her on the back in a very non-romantic fashion after they pseudo made out and on Crate in the last movie. There was an enormous amount of backlash on Rose in The Last Jedi, and I'll admit, like, I was part of that, not in sort of the didn't have anything to do with some of the really inappropriate feedback that she received from a lot of the internet nerds out there, but you know, she's basically this trilogy's Jar Jar, I think, is a possible way to look at it. And I'm, you know, what are your thoughts on them deciding to sideline her for this movie? Do you care? Do you have a problem with it? Do you think they should have redeemed her? Or do you think that that's probably the best thing that they should have done in this case?
Well, you know what? I think it's a little bit of all three, actually. I agree with you. I did not like the Rose character at all. I thought it was a silly character. I thought the way she was treated and the way they did this, quote, relationship with her and Finn, I didn't care for at all. These are movies that directors make, and we as fans don't always get to agree with the position that they take. But to start an internet movement to you know, get rid of a movie, in my mind, it's laughable, it's ridiculous,
right?
And no actor or actress deserves that kind of hate that character got. And so I guess because of that, I was sort of hoping that JJ would have given the middle finger to the fans and like made her the main character of the movie. You know what I mean? Just like fuck you, like this is what I'm going to do. Now, who knows? Maybe he was going to, and she didn't want that. Maybe, you know, probably not. But, you know, I mean, I guess in the end, I was okay with Rose being kind of a side character. I do think it was a little bit weird that we got this. They were clearly building towards a relationship between Finn and Rose, and they never paid it off. Like, it just kind of fizzled. So I think that made for a little bit of a disjointed storytelling experience, but there's a lot of that in this movie. So yeah,
I agree. I think that Kelly Marie Tran is a good actress. She's a fine actress. She's she did one of the voice roles for the Raya and the Last Dragon, and she was really good in that.
That's a great movie, by the way.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's super good. I really, really like that movie too. I've watched it about 17 times with both my children. And I think that she was the victim of a lot of really inappropriate commentary based off of her nationality and her physical appearance and things like that. And it was just really sad and really stupid. But what I will say is that I don't think her character was set up for us to really like her. I don't think it was written very well in the second movie. And I don't think that there's room in this movie based off of everything that JJ wants to throw at us to try to redeem that. So I personally think it's okay that we did this, as much as I'm sad, because I don't feel like that actress or that character deserved all the hate that they received. I thought that was kind of crappy.
Yeah, I think the reality is this really, if you were gonna go back and redo this movie, you would either go back and make it 2 movies, or you would cut a bunch of shit out and make it a single movie. There's just way too much in here, in my opinion, to make this a 2.5 hour. Like there's just so much that's stuffed in here. It could easily have been, in my mind, 2 movies, but then of course it's not a trilogy, right?
Well, it should have been though. It really should have been 2 movies. Like, I mean, obviously the last Harry Potter book got split into 2 movies, right? So there's no reason in the world. I thought I read something on this and I don't remember what it was, but there was a conscious decision not to make this into 2 movies. And that to me absolutely blows me away, because not only would they have made another $1 billion that they could have put in their pocket, but they could have actually taken the time to tell a cohesive story between the 2 movies, right? They could have had a little background exposition on why the Emperor is back. They could have given Rose a couple extra scenes to redeem the shitty character that she was in the last movie. They could have done a lot of things, and they just didn't do it. And I don't understand why. I don't understand why Kathleen Kennedy wanted that, but it is what it is, and this is what we have.
Yep, I agree.
So we're going to have our last exchange between Rey and Leia. And this is a really sweet scene. Daisy Ridley really sells this for me, and as being the last goodbye to Carrie Fisher, which I think is a really nice moment for all Star Wars fans. And then we get our most convenient retcon when we see some creature welding Kylo's mask back together. We cut to that, right? Like, I'm not entirely sure why we're doing this, but I'm going to go with it because it looks really fucking cool. Like, it's now all glued back together with this red fluorescent glue that makes it look really cool, almost like blood that's just glowing off of his mask. And then we're reintroduced to the Knights of Ren, who seemed to be a big deal in the first movie, but we never really got anything else. So I'm not sure. We talked about it before, but we apparently briefly in Force Awakens, we had a cameo by those guys, only to be completely abandoned in The Last Jedi. So Rian Johnson didn't want anything to do with these characters, and then all of a sudden they look to be accompanying the new Supreme Leader as he tracks down Rey. And Rey and crew stumble upon the Festival of Ancestors back on Pasaana, which happens once every 42 years, which, if you do the math, is the exact number of years since A New Hope, which is kind of a cool little Easter egg there. We get some cool imagery as the natives dance in the celebration, and our heroes start looking around for clues. And then Kylo FaceTimes her and grabs the necklace from Rey, which she got from a native, to somehow use that to figure out where she was, which was a very quick way of pushing the story forward, which, we're going to see a lot of that. Our heroes are stopped by stormtroopers before a masked man with a crossbow saves them and takes them to shelter, only to find out that it's none other than fan favorite Lando Calrissian. And, I love this. I think it's a heartwarming moment between all these characters and Lando, especially Chewie, when they have their little moment there. And all my original trilogy feels are blazing at this point. And I don't know. I mean, what did you feel about Lando's return? Did you like it? Did it sort of seem like a consolation prize, or were you really kind of digging what they were doing here?
I feel like I've been giving you a lot of non-answers tonight, but both. Yes, I was really digging it. I thought this was an appropriate spot for Lando to be in. I think this is about this Billy D. Williams here in this film did about as much as I think he could probably do. I still think the appropriate spot would have been for him to be the codebreaker in The Last Jedi. But if that isn't the case, I'm actually good with this. Up until we get to the very end, I actually really love how they treated Lando here. And I thought he did a great job. And you're right, all the feels when it comes to the original trilogy stuff. I'm glad they didn't, but I was kind of surprised they didn't do a where's Han, Han, Chewie, Lando kind of thing. I'm glad they didn't, but I thought that might come. But no, I enjoy this. I will say I didn't, until this movie, I didn't get the true importance of the Force time with Rey and Kylo, and the fact that he could think, do the Freddy Krueger Dream Warrior thing and grab something, right, and bring it out.
Yeah, I like that.
Like they showed it in the last movie where he had like moisture on his glove, but I didn't really put two and two together that he could actually, there was a physical component to that until this scene right here,
sure.
where he grabbed the necklace or whatever, the beads or whatever it was. So I thought that was cool. I don't know if I was the only one that hadn't kind of picked up on that there was actually a physical, they were transferring stuff, via the Force. But it was cool. I think the way they kind of really hammered that home here.
Yeah, I agree. And then Lando actually gives us a little exposition about the Sith Wayfinder, that an old Jedi hunter, Ochi of Bestoon, had a clue, which him and Luke were actually searching for. And his ship was apparently left somewhere in the desert on Pasaana. So we then hear the screams of these TIE fighters, and that was super quick, by the way. Like, it took all of 6 seconds for Kylo to figure out where they were and send a fleet of TIE fighters their way as our heroes are trying to escape. And Lando brings back the "I've got a bad feeling about this," which is great. I love that because it was not uttered in The Last Jedi. One of the many things that I feel The Last Jedi broke tradition. The other thing was the Wilhelm scream. If you are familiar with that specific sound effect, if you Google it and you look it up, you'll notice that it's a very famous old school sound effect where somebody is screaming, and you will hear it in every single Star Wars movie, except for the 8th movie. Actually, I don't know if they brought it back for this one. I could be wrong, but I thought they did, but I'm not sure. But Lando brings back, I've got a bad feeling about this. Escaping in the speeders, the First Order follows them in a pretty fun chase scene reminiscent of the old pod race. And we see stormtroopers flying around, and they're gunned down fortuitously right by Ochi's ship. And they land in the quicksand. And Finn decides at that moment, for reasons that are undetermined, that he has to tell Rey something, and it's going to be super important. I don't know what we were supposed to think that this was, but we're never actually going to get this spelled out for us. But I think we're going to get a lot of hints as we go through. But we'll get to that later because it doesn't really become an important plot point. But under the sand, they search for the caverns and they find Ochi, or at least what's left of him, and his speeder, which just happens to have a Sith hood ornament for reasons I don't understand, and a knife that has the inscription containing the location of the Wayfinder, which 3PO can read, but he won't speak it out loud because it's written in the language of the Sith, which he's not allowed to verbally translate.
What?
Okay, so
what the fuck?
So, as some people would say, lots to unpack here. So yeah, so they find Ochi under the sand, and they find this dagger, which they don't know how or why at this point, but it will tell them where the other Wayfinder is. Now, why there's a dagger that acts as a map, man, there's a lot of crap here that I really don't like, but whatever, I'm going with it. There's some fun stuff going on, so I don't know. I guess I'm pushing forward. Are you like, what do you think? Are you like WTF here or what?
A little bit, yes. So the back to the speeder chase. They showed a lot of this stuff, I believe, in one of the trailers, and this was probably one of the only comedic scenes in here where they fly, like that kind of thing. And it was just kind of silly. It wasn't as bad as the mom jokes from The Last Jedi, but it was close. It was cheesy. And then they get, they're under the sand, and Finn is gonna tell her either I love you, or I'm a Jedi, or I'm a Jedi and I love you, or but I don't, whatever reasons. It doesn't matter. The only redeeming thing in here is there's some kind of quippy back and forth between Finn and Poe, which I really like. They've got this, again, the dagger thing is it's just silly. The fact that we're supposed to believe that Luke was looking for this guy, and this band of idiots can just randomly happen upon him, but the Jedi Master Luke couldn't find it. Like, come on.
We're gonna get to even dumber stuff when it comes to this dagger and this.
The Goonie dagger is what I refer.
I like that. That's good. The Goonie dagger.
Yeah.
The one-eyed Willy dagger.
Yeah, it's just again, it's contrivance on top of contrivance. And yes, I'm going with it, but I'll be honest with you. At this point in the movie, I'm kind of like, hey, danger, Will Robinson. Like we might be in trouble. You know what I mean? It's not nearly as bad as the PETA scene on Canto Bight with the horses that we're supposed to love, but it's close, right? It's still not a slow speed chase running out of gas, but this section here is, now they redeem it here very quickly. But this section here is bad. Is bad. Yeah,
I agree. I agree. And then we're interrupted by a giant underground snake, which does little of anything but to just give Rey an opportunity to show off her new force power, which is healing. We haven't really seen that specifically in this saga so far, explained as transferring her life energy from her to the snake. So to be fair, it doesn't do anything here, but it really sets up what we're going to see in the final chapter of this movie. And then the Knights of Ren are combing the desert, as I have in my notes here, a la Spaceballs. I mean, it's literally, they're fucking combing the desert. I mean, they were walking around.
Found shit.
If they were walking around with a giant plastic hair pick, it wouldn't surprise me. But it's some really beautiful aerial shots, I will say that, of Kylo and the Knights of Ren. And then we seen what we saw in the very first trailer that came out, when Rey's being chased by what we now know is Kylo's fighter and manages to just jump and hurtle over it, which is just a gorgeous scene. And then she slices one of the wings and it causes them to crash, but somehow not die, because that thing completely, it takes like 600 revolutions before it finally craps out, and it's a stunning visual. I mean, it's really gorgeous. Maybe one of the best ones in the whole movie, where they do that slow motion thing where she jumps over that ship. It's really cool. And then Chewie's kidnapped by the Knights of Ren and taken prisoner in this ship. And Rey tries to, so the ship launches, right? And it's going out into space, and she's trying to hold it with the Force. I'm not really sure what the ultimate goal from her was supposed to be. And then Kylo, of course, emerges from the wreckage and challenges her. And Rey pushes so hard that she inadvertently shoots this familiar-looking Force lightning from her fingertips and destroys the ship, quote-unquote, killing Chewie. And at this point, we're going to get what I consider to be the first example of some we'll call it vegan storytelling, right? There's no stakes at all. They basically say that they're going to kill Chewie, and then they, of course, eventually don't. But did you think he was dead? Did you think that they killed Chewie at this point?
I did. I actually did. The first time I saw it, I was like, oh shit, they just killed Chewie.
And how did you feel about that decision?
It's a good question. You know what? Even though my nickname is Chewie, has never been one of my top 2 or 3 characters. You know what I mean? I was bummed, but I was like, oh, there are stakes in this movie, right? to use your analogy, right? I think pretty quickly, we're told that it wasn't real, and I was kind of bummed that they undid it, not because I wanted Chewie to die, but I was like, oh, they didn't go for it. They didn't really do. Here's the best analogy I can make. So in Avengers Endgame, there's a scene where, after, spoiler alert, everybody comes back through the portals and Thanos is raining down hellfire, and immediately all of the Dr. No guys put up their force fields, right? And we're like, oh shit, well, nobody's gonna die, right? And that was the best. It kind of took away the importance of that scene, right?
Sure.
I was ready to be like, oh wow, Rey is dealing with the dark side. She's got lightning. She's trying to fight with it, and the byproduct of her fighting with herself was she killed Chewie. Like there's a good story in there, right? Like, oh my God, like the evil took over and now I have to reconcile with the fact that I killed my friend and I killed, like there's really good storytelling there. And for reasons they didn't do it. So that's a really long way to answer your question. But
no, I agree completely, because my biggest pet peeve, I think, of this movie is that they try to tell us that Rey is really struggling with being good versus bad, but I don't ever feel that. And if she had actually killed Chewie, you know, obviously unintentionally, then there would have been a lot more at stake there with her potentially swinging to the dark side. And the fact that it never actually happened sort of just made it like it just made it not important, you know.
Yeah,
that's disappointing.
And I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but there's a scene later in the movie where you see the quote evil Rey, right? Well, you based on this scene, you know it's not real. It's just a vision, or in fact, I even think they put that in the trailer, right? And as soon as we saw it in the trailer, we're like, it's just a vision or it's a dream or whatever.
Right.
And again, because of this, the choice that they made here, and again, I'm not advocating that they kill Chewie, but it just would have been a very different scene and a very different rest of the movie if they had gone that route.
I think they should have. I'll be honest. I think that they should have done something a little bit more brave than what they did. They didn't really take any chances with anything in this story. And that's disappointing. As much as I don't want to see Chewie die, I think that it would have held more weight and would have been more conflict if they would have actually pulled that trigger. But they didn't. So Chewie and the dagger are now gone. 3PO reminds them he has the location of the Wayfinder in his memory, but it can only be obtained by finding a hacker. So Poe takes them to Kijimi, which is yet another planet in this movie. So we've got, you know, 3 planets in very short succession, and where he knows somebody. And then we meet Dio, who is a skittish new robot that's voiced by J.J. Abrams himself, which I don't know. And in retrospect, there's probably no reason to even bring that up because that character is not really worth anything. But Kijimi is a cool looking city made mostly of stone in the middle of snowfall. Poe is able to find an old flame Zuri who takes him to see Babu Frick. But the Knights of Ren have tailed them to this point, so they are aware of what's going on. Then we get a very fleeting cameo by the maestro himself, John Williams, for those of you who are paying close attention, who appears in his first Star Wars movie as a local bartender. And if you watch this, the behind the scenes for this movie, there's a really cool story about how he is, JJ surrounded him with 51 different trinkets around the bar that he's bartending. And every one of those trinkets represent one of the Oscar nominations, because John Williams at that point had earned 51 Oscar nominations. So there's one little trinket up there, which is like the barrels from Jaws. There's another one, which is E.T.'s ship. There's something from Close Encounters. Every movie that he had ever been nominated for, there was a little trinket behind the bar for that. And of course, this movie would end up being his 52nd Academy Award nomination, which he unfortunately would not win for. But, you know, got to give love to John Williams at every opportunity. And then we cut to C-3PO. He's all wired up with Babu Frick and company. And they tell us that they're going to have to wipe his memory in order to get the Sith translation. And then I feel like we get, honestly, one of the most heartfelt and genuine moments from C-3PO in the entire saga, when he says that he's taking one last look at his friends. And this may be the greatest moment that they give C-3PO in this entire saga. Like, I think this is a really good thing, and they do a really solid justice to C-3PO, more so than R2-D2 in this entire series, by making him more relevant in this movie than I think ever before.
This scene right here is my absolute favorite C-3PO scene, period, paragraph, end of story. Not just this movie, not just this trilogy, ever C-3PO.
Yeah.
It's the one time where he is not the protocol droid that speaks 6 million languages. He's not human, but he has recognized and he has internalized all of the experiences that he has had, and these are my friends and I'm saying goodbye to them because I'm putting the quote mission above myself. And maybe I'm reading way too much into that, but I don't particularly like C-3PO as a character. He's a little bit too used car salesman to me. He's a little bit too prim and proper and just kind of got to stick up his ass all the time. And I understand that's the way he's written, right? I don't particularly care for that character. Right here, like I get all the feels, and it's great.
Yeah, I think my only hesitation in this scene is that I wish it was with somebody from the original trilogy, because I think it needs to be. Yes. I don't feel like he has as much currency with these new characters, because if you're trying to parse this out chronologically, he's only known them for what, a couple months at this point. Like, it hasn't been very long. So him having these feels for these characters isn't really there. Like, if Luke had been a part of this party or whatever, then I think it would have been more impactful. But ultimately, I recognize that they're giving 3PO a moment, which they didn't have to do, and they did. And I liked it. I thought it was really good.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, would have been most perfect if it was R2, if R2 was here.
Yeah.
But I agree.
So Zuri and Poe have this moment where 3PO is all wired up, and she shows them this medallion that will allow access to the First Order landing blocks, which, you know, this is going to come back. It's pretty heavy-handed that this is going to return. And Rey remembers, she starts having these flashbacks of Ochi's ship being the one that took her parents away, which is kind of interesting. And then 3PO's translation eventually tells them that the Wayfinder is on a moon in the Endor system, while Rey's destroyer Kylo Ren's destroyer shows up out of nowhere, and Rey can feel the presence of Chewie, and they hatch a plan to go rescue him, which will require the new medallion that Zuri just gave them. So again, contrivance after contrivance, but I'm going with it. I'm having fun. While they're on the ship, they split up, and Rey goes to Kylo's quarters to get the dagger, while Poe and Finn look for Chewie, and they find him and then mow over a handful of stormtroopers before they get captured. Rey gets the dagger, but not before Kylo force times her again, and they square off, but he doesn't know where she is, which is really interesting. And he takes the opportunity to reveal to her that her parents were in fact somebody, or they were nobody, but this was all Palpatine's doing. And we're gonna get more from that. So Kylo finds out after a few lightsaber swings that she's on the ship, and he's like, okay, hold on, I'll be right there, and starts to make his way that direction. And then Hux takes our heroes to execute them, but then reveals himself as the spy that sets them free, which I think is a really interesting twist. I don't know how I feel about it, but I guess, you know, Hux doesn't get much love in this movie, and he's about to get a lot less love in the upcoming scene. But everyone comes together in the dock where the Falcon escapes, while Rey and Kylo Ren square off face to face, which is where we find out officially that she is a Palpatine and that they are a dyad in the Force. And I'm curious to know where you are with this, as far as, you know, this being the reveal, and what are we supposed to think about what the hell a dyad is and where this is going?
Yeah, so I'm kind of, at this point, I'm kind of two minds. Right after The Last Jedi, there was still an awful lot of talk about who is Rey and what is her parentage and what is her lineage. Like there was always conversations swirling around who is Rey? Is she a Kenobi? Is she a Skywalker? Is she a Palpatine? Is she a this, that, and the other thing? I was pretty convinced. Let me say this. I wasn't surprised when it was revealed that Rey was a Palpatine. Like that was kind of my theory. I didn't really know why, or, you know, what have you, but that was kind of my theory. So I wasn't surprised at that, and I also wasn't upset with that. I'm glad she wasn't a Skywalker. I think it would have been too contrived within the Star Wars universe for her to be a Skywalker. I still think it would have been really kind of cool if she was a Kenobi, but whatever. The concept of a dyad to me still doesn't make a whole lot of sense, even several years later. It's unfair. is the best way I can describe it, right? They are this thing that we didn't know about that can like win everything. You know what I mean? It's almost as if you're playing a video game and on the last level you find, oh, there's this thing over here that all I had to do the whole time is get this and then I win, right? It's like this ultimate weapon that you didn't even know about until you're 17 hours through the game, right? And that's kind of what this movie feels like. Is it feels like a video game where you're just going from level to level and you're finding new stuff along the way. Oh, I'm in the sand planet and oh, hey, look, I found the dagger. And then, oh, I'm on the ice planet and oh, look, I found the Wayfinder. And oh, it's just like over and over again. They just keep introducing, oh, you've got to go to the forest moon of Endor and you've got to find the second Wayfinder. And oh, just like it just continues to happen. And again, I'm willing to go with it because I'm such a huge uber Star Wars nerd. But I'll be honest with you, if you're not a Star Wars fan, watching this movie, I would be like, I'm out. Fuck it. Like what's next? I'm gonna find the great lightsaber that kills everything. And you know what I mean? Like that I've never even heard of. Like that's kind of what it feels like.
It's not great storytelling, and I can't tell if it's because there's just too much to retcon or if they're just trying to fast forward through this whole thing, but they're clearly hoping that they will be able to play to the older audience, I think, and get them to forgive them for some of these obnoxious sins that they're not done with them yet. There's going to be more to come for sure.
No, and here's the problem, right? The problem is, and I can understand that they're clearly playing to us, and that like that's fine. I get it. We're the people that are paying the ticket prices for us and our kids and this, that, and the other thing. But like, think about if you were watching this through the lens of somebody that didn't have 8 movies worth of backstory and 27 books worth of reading and 150 episodes of comics and Clone like and just all of that stuff. Like I look about like through my wife's eyes, right? All my wife has been accustomed to or looked at from a Star Wars perspective is like the first 8 movies, right? She would look at this and be like, what the fuck is going on? Who are all these people? You know, Henry Jones, right? When you build a contrivance on top of another one and then throw in a character that you've never heard of and then introduce 2 or 3 new force powers that we've never heard of before.
Yeah.
The rules are just out the window. That's the problem with this movie.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we're not done. For the time being, Rey escapes on the Falcon in a really cool scene where she jumps out into space to grab onto the Falcon. It looks really cool. I don't know how practical it is, but and then we get a very quick scene with General Pride, who is our new bad guy of this movie, who sniffs out Hux and basically shoots him and kills him, and so ends Hux. That's the end of him. And then the Falcon lands rather roughly on the unnamed Kefbir, I think is what I found when I looked it up. Kefbir. Maybe that's something back. I don't know what that is. They have dumb names here. But we get a really nice visual of the remnants of the second Death Star. And that's, you know, I remember seeing that in the very first trailer that came out. And I was just like, wow, I can't even imagine where they're going to go with this. But then in one of the absolute worst contrivances in the entire saga, Rey uses this knife, the markings on the blade to line up and point right where the Wayfinder is. And all I'm thinking this whole time is, holy shit, this is so terrible. Because they don't know where they're supposed to stand, but they have these markings on this thing that is supposed to, literally, just like you said, the Goonies, right? The one-eyed Willy thing, where they have that medallion that sort of, they can line everything up. It's a visual marker. And in order for the visual marker to be effective, they have to be in the right place. And there was they were on a whole new planet or moon or whatever the hell it was. Oh God, it was so bad that they just sort of magically found. I get that they need to push it along, but shit, they could have found a better way to do it. Or they could have just dropped a line of dialogue that says, stand on the highest point of this mountain or something like that. And they could have done this better, but they just got lazy.
Well, they did. And the problem that I have with this is they didn't need to. like they literally could have had the message that 3PO said, translated. They could have said, "Oh, the Sith Wayfinder was in the Emperor's throne room on the Death Star." Done. Like, okay,
Yeah.
now I know where I'm going.
Right.
Oh, that's convenient. The Death Star fell onto Endor. Oh, now I know where it is. Like,
Yeah.
You don't need the dagger. You don't need to go under the sand. You don't need the silk. Like, you don't need any of that stuff. And again, it's like, yes, they were lazy, but they were lazy when they didn't need to be. Like, they could have been less lazy and told us a better story.
So then Rey disappears and she makes her way to the Death Star via a skimmer over some very, very rough waters, and eventually uncovers a secret passage when she gets to the Death Star. So she finds her way to the throne room, which I think is really interesting. But I will say that for me personally, like, I didn't recognize the throne room. I don't know if the throne room itself wasn't a very iconic visual spectacle, but when she got there, like, I didn't get overwhelmed with, oh my God, she's on the Death Star. Like, it didn't feel like that to me visually. I don't know if you felt the same way or if
Yeah, I think it was almost, it was in such a degree of disrepair that it was difficult to recognize.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing that was going on was the throne room in Jedi it was very dark. It was lit. It was in space, so it was all very dark. And this was very light, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of light outside. And
That's
so
a good point.
it was just really difficult to be like, oh, that's the same room, but we just happen to be in the daylight. I mean, I think if it was dark in that scene, and if it was set against space as opposed to set against the water and the brightness that was that Endor moon, I think it would have been a little bit easier to figure out, oh, here's where I am. And again, if it was less destroyed than it was.
So she gets there, she gets to the throne room, and she uncovers the secret passage, which leads her to a brief encounter with evil Rey, repeating some of the beats from Dagobah and the butthole cave on the Sneeze Planet. Those are my notes anyways. She grabs the Wayfinder, then gets pushed out and drops it, only to see it picked up by Kylo Ren, and he crushes it in his hands, causing her to go into this blind rage, which starts a really beautiful lightsaber fight. Like, this scene is really good. I think that they do a good job of pitting the two of them against each other at the height of their powers. And then we kind of cut back and forth from that to Leia, who suddenly appears to be very weak, and then Maz Kanata, who again hasn't had anything to do since the first movie, back from her trade dispute in The Last Jedi, gives us some really sloppy exposition that says she's going to use all her strength that she has left to contact Kylo. And okay, that's cool. I don't think we needed to be clobbered with that, but Rey and Kylo take their laser sword battle to the outside, where a really great fight ensues. It's gorgeous. Like, this thing with all the water flying around, I think it's really awesome. And we see Kylo getting the best of Rey. I mean, he's completely manhandling her. And then right before the final blow, Leia calls his name from afar, distracting him just long enough for Rey to impale him with his own blade. So he drops his saber and she grabs it and stabs him with it. And with this moment, we see Princess Leia release her final breath, and she dies right in front of R2-D2. And it's definitely a bit of a heart-wrenching moment. I think we all sort of knew something like this was coming, but when it happens, it's kind of crazy. But instead of finishing the job, Rey just uses the Force to heal Kylo and bring him back to life, which is, again, follow-up to the snake thing from the cave on Pasaana. And then she retreats to her ship and flies away, leaving the rest behind. And I'm a little confused by this move and what comes next, just because I feel like it's really uneven. But Leia passes away. She dies, and the Resistance is mourning her passing, which is really the only time in the whole trilogy we get a proper goodbye, I think. And I think we got a good one here. And Chewie, he breaks down and he screams, and I feel like it's really befitting to that relationship. And I almost feel like that's a bit of a mea culpa for his lack of anything with Han or Luke, for that matter. And then we cut really quickly back to the Death Star, where Kylo is staring off into the distance. And then we hear, in my opinion, the most chill bump inducing words when we hear, "Hey kid," and Kylo turns around to see his father, Han Solo, for the last time. And, I guess, first of all, it's a little weird because it comes in the form of a memory. It's not a force ghost. It's really more of a memory, and clearly a different kind of contrivance, which is the kind to get Harrison Ford back in this film. But I mean, I love it. I think it's great. And I cannot even think of it without getting the chills. And I'm wondering how you feel about, I know how you feel about this, but I'm going to give you your chance to just jizz all over it, because it's a fantastic scene.
It is. Yeah. This is one of the scenes that I mentioned where I get goosebumps every time I think about it or every time I see it. We've talked about them. There are numerous contrivances in this film. This is one that I do not care about. And I fully recognize that I do not care about it because I am the absolute target market and target audience for this particular film and this particular scene. Yep. And I do not care even a little bit. I understand that Harrison Ford wanted to go out in Jedi. He wanted to go, and they killed him, relatively unceremoniously. Yes, I mean it was a big scene, but it was that's not true. I guess that's not true. It's not like he went out like Boba. He did make the fatal flaw of like walking onto a catwalk in Star Wars, which you never fucking do.
Yeah, we covered that bullshit.
Right. This was Han's opportunity to talk to his son, right? This was the opportunity for him to, or I guess it's not even Han's. It's our opportunity to say goodbye to Han Solo in a way that we really didn't get to in the last movie or when he died. And yeah, I mean, it's, again, I recognize and I capitulate that this might not be solid all around storytelling, but in this instance, I just don't care. It's two really iconic characters coming together and giving us a scene that it's great. It's great. And you know what? And again, I don't know. We talked a little bit about Harrison Ford in our previous episodes about, does he care about this stuff? I think it was pretty clear that like when he put on that jacket and the blaster, he was back as Han Solo, right? And in my mind, he clearly is here as well. Granted, it's one scene, probably took him a day to film it, but like he's either a really good actor or he took the opportunity to finally say goodbye to that character, which, arguably is his greatest character. It's between him and Indiana Jones, right? But he took the opportunity and he took it seriously. He's only got 2 or 3, 4 lines of dialogue, but it was really, really special to this 44-year-old parent of 3 who grew up with Star Wars.
So you made a really, really great point that I didn't even think of, which is this was sort of our opportunity to say goodbye to Han Solo, right? Because we didn't really get that in the first movie, and there was no recognition for that from any of the characters after that point. So that's reason number one, that this scene is arguably one of the most important scenes in the movie. The second reason, in my opinion, is that Han Solo was brought back, not just to parade Harrison Ford back on the screen one more time, but because Kylo Ren's father needed to give him forgiveness so that the audience would believe that his journey back to being Ben Solo would be valid, right? Because there's no way we're going to forgive Kylo for killing his father, who happens to be the most beloved character in the entire saga, right? Like, there's nothing we could do to ever forgive him. But if Han Solo says that we have to forgive him, then we will follow Han Solo's lead. And even if Han Solo is a goofy bullshit memory, we don't care, right? Like, Harrison Ford shows up, he tells us we're supposed to forgive Kylo, and we do. And that sort of separates Kylo from Darth Vader, right? Like, Darth Vader went back and he murdered a bunch of children, right? It's kind of hard to kind of put all those pieces back together and forgive him for what he did. But if Han Solo comes back in ghost form and tells us, the audience, that we have to forgive Kylo, then we do, and we will, and we have. And that is the only reason we're going to buy the third act of this movie, is because Harrison Ford came back and told us to do that. And that's why this scene is most important. And I alluded to that when we did our Force Awakens podcast, that that this scene was really, really important for a lot of reasons, or at least a couple of reasons. This is the biggest one, in my opinion. We don't believe Kylo's journey back to Ben Solo until Harrison Ford tells us it's okay to do so.
You're right. I never thought there would be a way, and I'm going to tip my hand a little bit, and I think I've mentioned it. I love the journey that Kylo Ren / Ben Solo goes on over these three journeys, or over these three movies. I think ultimately he's probably one of the best characters in this sequel trilogy. I don't know that I've ever been able to articulate it nearly as well as you just did, in terms of, this is Han letting me know it's okay to like Ben Solo. It's okay to like Kylo Ren.
Yeah, huge point there.
It is. It absolutely is, because, you know, if you go back in the archives of our podcast, Han Solo is my all-time favorite Star Wars character. And the fact that a character, let alone his son, killed my favorite character should preclude me from ever liking that character, Kylo Ren. Mm-hmm. And yet I do. And you're right. It's because Han told me that it was okay, in so many words. And now from here on out in the rest of the movie, and again, I'm going to tip my hand again, the rest of this movie, and again, there's some contrivances and still some fuckery going on, but from here on out, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Like I'm okay. Hey, you know what? Kylo took that lightsaber, he tossed it away. Han said it was okay. Clearly Kylo we don't know he's going to be Ben, but he's a good guy now, or he's at least kind of turned the corner. And I just got goosebumps again talking about it. We're off to the races for the third act.
Yeah. And of course, in true Han Solo fashion, right before Ben has a chance to apologize for what he did to his father, Harrison Ford just looks at him with that iconic look and that iconic quote and says, "I know." And I think that's the greatest thing, right? Like, you just repeat that beat from Empire Strikes Back, and it's just, It's glorious. I never want that moment to end, but I'm so glad that it did, and that it's this little beautiful, wonderful, self-contained moment. And then General Pride meets with the hologram of Palpatine, where he is beckoned to Exegol. And there's this line, that Pride says, "As I served you in the old wars, I serve you now." And I'm wondering this whole time, like, was he in the first movie, or was he in the first trilogy? That would be a series of books that I would probably read. I don't think he was. Or if he was, he wasn't on screen. The actor wasn't part of that, but I have to think that the character was in some way.
But again, this is where I come back to, okay, so all of these thousands of troops have been under the ice for 30 years, just like waiting. That's where my mind goes. It's like, what have you been doing since you served me in the old wars? That's where my mind is.
Right.
It's like, you've been fucking hanging around. I don't get it.
Yeah. So Kijimi is then blown up by a ship from a single ship from Exegol, which, I am thinking, why are you only sending one, and how many do you actually need, and what are you waiting for? But Poe has a very intimate moment with Leia, with Leia's body, I should say, when Lando comes in and gives a much needed pep talk. And man, at this point, I'm like, I wanted more of Lando. Like, that moment, I thought was a great moment. I thought that Lando really sold. Oh gosh, he was sort of the glue that kind of brought things back together, and it made me think, Jesus Christ, why did we wait until this movie to get these guys back together? Like, we should see Luke and Han and Leia and Lando all on the screen at the same time. I mean, and Lando's an honorable mention, but he needs to be here.
Well, he does, but here's the thing. Lando's the only OG character left in these movies.
Yes.
With the exception of the droids, and they're not even really in it either.
Yeah.
He's the only one that's left. And so that's why he's kind of that glue that's holding everything together. He's, everybody else is dead at this point.
Yeah. So speaking of dead OG characters, we see Rey retreating to Ahch-To and burning her only mode of transport. And I had a big problem with this scene just because I couldn't figure out the motivation. Like, I didn't get from where she thought she had killed Kylo, but then of course she healed him, to being like, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm just going off the grid. I'm going to be the next Luke Skywalker. And so she goes to Ahch-To and she's burning her ship, and she, I don't know. Is there any other reasonable explanation for this cameo, for her being here, other than to give us the Luke Skywalker cameo. And now granted, I love the Luke Skywalker cameo. I think we all knew we were going to get one. But Jesus Christ, even after he's dead, he's still stuck on this fucking sneeze planet, man. Like, what did he do to deserve this? He cannot get a break.
That's hilarious. So yeah, even as a ghost, he's stuck on this island where he's drinking milk out of the teat of some dinosaur, right? So yes, all jokes aside, I agree with you. It's a big leap for Rey to go from where she was to here. But the only but that it will offer there is, if you think about the quote training that she received, which, as we talked about in a previous podcast, was like 2 days worth of Luke yelling at her and going about his day and eating fish and drinking milk and whatever. This is what she knows of the Jedi, right? The only thing that she knows is when the going get tough, the tough retreat to a deserted island where nobody else is around, right? So I guess that's the only.
That's interesting.
You know what I mean? Like that's her version of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Her version of the Jedi is a pussified version of Luke, where I'm going to retreat to this island, right? It's not the Jedi that we know, right? So we're looking at her as being abnormal, but again, through her lens, this is what she knows. Again, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I guess I kind of got it a little bit more maybe than you did.
I understand why they did it. What I don't agree with was the execution. Like, it just didn't feel natural. Like, from the scene where she left Endor to the point where she got there, she's already burning a ship. And I just didn't, like, there was a big transition there that I just didn't follow, I guess, from my own perspective. I think the decision makes sense. They just cut to it so quickly that it was not gradual enough that I really followed it. But you know, you saw this look on Mark Hamill's face when he said,
"Jedi's weapon deserves more respect."
And you could just see him grinning ear to ear, almost like he was like, "Fuck you, Rian Johnson! Like, how dare you make me toss that lightsaber over my shoulder?" Like that was a dumb way to handle that whole thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, and this is going to sound weird, but there's a lot of Mark Hamill coming out in Luke Skywalker here that we didn't necessarily get in his last two portrayals, right? Obviously his first portrayal was just like a 8-second cameo. He didn't say a word, and then the second movie, and I read, and again I don't know where I read it, but I read an account that suggested that Mark Hamill did not know that they were going to kill Luke Skywalker at the end of The Last Jedi. I don't know whether that's true or not, but like, if you look at the footage, it's entirely possible that he might not have known.
I think it's urban legend. I think that was some cleverly cut together footage. But yeah, I mean, I think so too. Yeah.
But
I saw that too.
But I would agree with you that, like, when he says that line about a Jedi's weapon, you're right. That's not Luke Skywalker talking. That's Mark Hamill talking.
Yeah.
Again, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And then Luke talks her out of, giving up the fight, and he gives her Leia's lightsaber. We get this flashback that you talked about earlier, where Leia and Luke are training with each other. That was really neat. I don't know if the digital effects were 100% convincing, but I thought they did a pretty good job with it. But then she pulls a crusty Wayfinder out of the ship that she just got done burning down, but realizes she can't get off the island. And that is, of course, when we get the ultimate Luke redemption scene, where he pulls his own X-Wing out of the water with a real shit-eaten grin smile on his face while he moves it. And of course, we get the Empire Strikes Back score from John Williams, and it's a great moment. I really like it. It's a bit ridiculous. I think it's goofy, and I hate to keep saying the word contrived, but it feels very contrived just to let Luke have his 5-second moment in this movie. But I really loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was cool that they even managed to work in you know, it was interesting because like the X-Wing thing was teased in The Last Jedi, and you're like, well, how the fuck are they going to use that? Like that's really weird. And then I thought that J.J. Abrams came up with a really great way to do that.
I didn't realize that I would be so geeked to see Red 5, but I was. And right. And yes, it might have been a bit contrived, but this one I was 100% okay with, right? It was just like, oh, she needs a ship. Hey, look, there's a ship. It happened to be under the water. And oh, it's a coincidence that, you know, he couldn't do it on Dagobah, and now he can, that he's a Jedi master and he's dead, whatever. But yeah, I was okay with this one for sure.
So we then cut to C-3PO, who gets his memory restored because apparently nobody realized that there was, you know, backups in the future, data protection backups. Apparently he had Comvault and R2 had the same agent on his system. I don't know. It's. Are there any stakes in this movie? I don't know. Chewie's dead. No. Now he's not. C-3PO gets his memory erased. Nah, just kidding. You know, there's just a lot of back in it. The Emperor died. Well, no, not really. There's a lot of that in this movie, but the Resistance receives a transmission from Luke's X-Wing, which is actually Rey showing them how to get to Exegol, which is kind of a cool touch. We then get the exposition about the navigation tower, which is what apparently is required for all the Final Order ships, the Final Order, very clever, to get out of Exegol. So our heroes put together a plan, a very unlikely, difficult plan to destroy it, along with all the planet-killing ships. And Lando's job is to go off and get help, which seems very unlikely because, I'm sorry, did the same exact fucking plan fail in the last movie where they all asked for help and nobody came? And that was Leia. Yeah. I mean, people are going to help Leia. Who's going to help Lando? Who the hell knows who Lando is?
They don't give a shit about Lando at all. So, okay. So just so I'm clear here, there's several hundred / 1,000 Imperial ships or Final Order ships that have been under the ice or in the clouds or wherever they were for 30 or 40 years with a full staff, and they don't know how to get out of where they are until right now.
I think they do. I just think they're waiting for some reason, and I'm not clear on what that reason is.
Okay, neither am I, because again, to your point earlier, they took one ship out and they blew up a planet. And again, at the end of Last Jedi, there's like 7 rebels left. Just this is where you just go Braveheart and you just like storm the beach, right? And you just kill everybody.
Yes, and I have the solution for that, which I will unveil in our epilogue, but we'll get there.
Okay.
This is I will rewrite this on a very high level to tell you the reason that I think that they should have done this, but we'll get there.
Okay.
So Rey arrives on Exegol. She finds her way with the Wayfinder to that planet, and with the Resistance close behind and what looks to be a hopeless endeavor, Finn then uses the Force.
That's not how the Force works.
To determine where the navigational signal is really coming from, which is the lead Star Destroyer. So they proceed to land a ground crew on the ship to take out the tower. Why couldn't they do this via a ship? Why do they need a ground crew? I'm not entirely sure, other than it makes for a really cool scene in the movie. Rey finally gets there. She confronts Granddaddy Palpatine, and he invites her to take the throne. And, you know, at this point, I'm never conflicted about whether she's going to do it or not. Like, I always know she's going to be the good guy. I don't ever really get the sense that she's being legitimately pulled to the dark side. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, there's absolutely zero tension here in this scene about whether or not she's going to choose the light or the dark. There's clearly tension about whether she's going to live, but no, I don't think there's any doubt that she is going to lie or deceive or whatever Palpatine, or just go at him guns blazing. No, I don't think there's no, at least in my mind, there was never any decision that she needed to make. Like, she had already made her decision when she came there.
Yeah,
I'm the good guy. And you know what? I think she was fully prepared to die right? I don't know that she even necessarily thought, oh, this is a battle that I could win.
Mm-hmm.
She was prepared to go down fighting and be a quote unquote Jedi like my father before me, right? Even though we don't know who her father is, right? I mean, she was ready to stand up and be a Jedi and take the fall regardless.
Yeah, which sort of salts that whole previous scene with the evil Rey and all that stuff. Like, doesn't seem like there was even a point to that at this juncture. But we then learn that the Emperor wants her to kill him so that his essence will pass into her. And they will become one. Like, it's kind of gross.
This is where it gets. Again, we've used the word a lot, contrivances, right? But it's like, here's what bums me out. It bums me out when we learn about new powers, or we learn about new rules, or we learn about new things that at this point we're 8.5 movies in, and we're just now learning about dyads and new powers, and I'm going to bring you back to life if your essence comes into me. It's kind of like in the Harry Potter with the Elder Wand, right? It's like, for me, like that didn't hold as much weight because I didn't know about what the Elder Wand was until the 43rd movie, right? If that had been introduced to me in movie number 1, and that was like a MacGuffin, quote unquote, that they were chasing for 17 movies, oh, well, now it's got stakes. But if you just introduce it to me at the very end, oh, hey, it's a dyad. Okay, well, what the fuck's a dyad? I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got this essence. I'm going to rebuild the Emperor. Oh, okay, I guess. That's my problem that I have here.
It's clearly a storytelling device. And, I don't have any problem with them introducing new powers or new dimensions to the powers that the Jedi have. But when they do it obnoxiously just to kind of cram it into the story to make something work, it just doesn't feel very good. So Finn manages to take the navigational signal down with a really cool ground assault as the Resistance start awaiting their backup. And then the Emperor starts talking to a legion of Sith people who I didn't even realize were in a very large crowd. Like, it was really weird the way it was so dark, and the way that it was shot, that I think they could have done that differently and made it look much cooler. But we get a very Jedi-like, Return of the Jedi-like flashback where he literally says, "Strike me down," as she watches her friends get blown out of the sky. Like, this is a direct lift from Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
And then we see a reimagined Ben Solo show up and work his way her direction to help. And then we hear a really nice major chord version of his theme. Another brilliant stroke from the maestro John Williams himself, since we haven't really talked about him much throughout this series. And then he comes up against the Knights of Ren. How did that happen? Why are they on Exegol? And how is he's already immediately sort of seemingly outmanned, which is interesting, but whatever. So Rey draws her saber as she approaches Palpatine and then puts it behind her head as if to strike, only it mysteriously disappears and finds its way to Kylo. So, he gives a very Han Solo appropriate shrug and goes to work on his old war buddies, which is sort of a continuation of the theme that those two can talk to each other and matter can pass back and forth between that conversation. It was water in in The Last Jedi, and then earlier in this movie, we saw more of that, the environment getting destroyed, right? Like when they were fighting between his ship and Kijimi, when he swung his lightsaber and it destroyed this artifact on his ship, and that's how he was able to see it. So we sort of get the graduation of that whole theme, where she actually is able to transport her lightsaber to him, and he's able to fight off the Knights of Ren, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it was a good payoff. Again, I didn't really figure it out in the last movie with the moisture. It really kind of hit home here with the beads. And yeah, this was a cool. Again, I've talked about kind of how silly I think the concept of a quote dyad is. But this is one scene here where it's really cool. To your point, I don't know why the Knights of Ren are here. They haven't really been super flushed out at all. But this is a really cool scene where Ben just like takes them all down by himself, and it really starts to show the connection, or really hammers home the connection between Rey and Kylo. One kind of cool thing is after Han Solo shows up, I don't think Ben has a line of dialogue in the rest of the movie. I think
he has one word,
like, "Ow" or something like that.
Yeah.
Where he like hits the thing.
He says,
yeah,
"Ow."
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he doesn't say anything for the rest of the movie, which I think is, I don't know if it was by design. It probably was by design, but I think that's kind of cool.
I think it's kind of cool. I'm not really sure why they decided to do that, but I mean, it works. Like, I don't miss anything from any dialogue there. I think that he was there to help her, and that moment really works. Rey then, in front of Palpatine, draws Leia's lightsaber out and starts being attacked by the Emperor's red guards. So every movie seems like the bad guy has these red guards that protect them, and these are called the Sovereign Protectors, apparently. But they're red. That's really all that matters. And I guess my question is, here's a weird sort of. Let me just toss this out there, and maybe this is goofy, but at the beginning of the scene, Palpatine is like, "Strike me down, kill me," and then when she's like, "No," then why are the guards now trying to kill her? Like he was trying to get her to kill him, right? And now when she's like, "No, that's not cool. I don't want to do that." Like now she's being attacked by his guards. Like, doesn't he want her to kill him? Like, why is there a conflict here other than for the purpose of having a conflict?
Yeah, I think it defaults back to bad guy bad, good girl good, right? It's like I have nothing. You're right. I mean, you're absolutely right, but I have nothing else to add.
He's like, kill me, and she's like, "No," and then she's like, "Okay, now I'm going to kill you," and then they're like, "No, you can't do that." It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. I don't know. Again, as we're introducing new powers and dyads and kill me and essence and this, that, and the other thing. Maybe like if she doesn't want to kill him, then it won't work. I don't know. I'm making
maybe
shit up on the fly.
But Palpatine has not figured out that they are a dyad yet. That's coming up here really soon.
That's true.
Ben and Rey do meet up to square off against Palpatine together when he inadvertently absorbs their life force and figures out that they are a dyad, and apparently the power of two restores the one. This is another nasty contrivance.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
But I like it because it actually, so, you described the Emperor at the beginning of the movie as sort of being this weird, decrepit version of himself. And it's sort of a zombified version of him. And he was, he didn't have any skin on his bones, and it was really kind of gross to look at. But then he zaps their power and then becomes basically the Emperor that we all know and love.
This contrivance, I'm good with. Yeah, I agree. This one, again, we've talked about it 100 times. Contrivance after contrivance, but this one fits, and I'm okay with it.
We cut back to space as we see the fighters converge, and unfortunately we see Snap Wexley, which might be the coolest name of the whole trilogy. He's dispatched. He was one of the characters from some of the J.J. Abrams shows. And Poe begins to lose all hope until he hears the familiar voice of Lando come through on his comms and turns around to see an armada of ships, backing him up. And all I can think of is, where the hell were these a-holes in The Last Jedi? Are we to believe that Lando could recruit a galaxy of rebels, but Leia couldn't? I mean, who cares? Lando comes through and it's a fun moment, but it's just sort of one of those like, what the hell happened here?
I will agree with that, but this is the second scene that gives me goosebumps every time I see it. When I see and I think it was even in the trailer, which I fucking hate that Star Wars does this. They ruin some of the most iconic scenes of their movies by putting stuff in the trailer. Like they did that with Darth Maul in Phantom Menace. They did a bunch of stuff, right? With the reveal of the double-sided lightsaber. They shouldn't have done it, but whatever. But when you see the Falcon come in here and kind of come into the middle of the screen and then all of those ships come out of light speed. This again, I'm all in. I'm cheering in the theater on opening night. My kids are looking at me like, what are you doing, Dad? And I don't even care. This is Lando at his best. He's saved the day. He's done what he needed to do. He's done what, to your point, what Leia couldn't do in the last movie. But he's got people. He's got the armada to back them up, and now it's game on.
Yeah. It's cool, if not kind of a ripoff of Avengers Endgame, right? Like, I'm pretty sure Lando
100%.
said, on your left, and here comes everybody else.
100%.
But I don't care.
Yeah.
I do not care. I mean,
Right.
Marvel has done a lot of things better than Star Wars. Let's just be honest about this, despite our love for the Star Wars universe. Like, Marvel has perfected a lot of things, but this was a great moment. It was really fun. We get a lot of fun cameos. The first being the return of Wedge Antilles, played again by Dennis Lawson, who is the real-life uncle of one Ewan McGregor, also known as Obi-Wan Kenobi.
That's
Small World, as well as the Ghost, which was the ship that Ezra Bridger and crew flew around in the Star Wars show Rebels, which, if nobody's watched that, it's a really good show. Takes a little while to get moving, but it's really solid. Palpatine emerges from the smoke with a new outfit and a new lease on life, and I don't really care how dumb it is at this point, because he looks cool and he's badass and he's getting ready to just unleash all holy hell. And then he force pushes Ben Solo down a cavern before turning his sights to the skies, where he sends this electrical storm of epic proportions up to destroy the efforts of the Resistance. And then we get this callback from the beginning of the movie where Rey is pleading with the Jedi to be with me. And this time they actually answer the call. And we get the impressive list of Jedi voice cameos, which will include the following: Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker, Olivia d'Abo as Luminara, Ashley Eckstein, who voiced Ahsoka Tano in both Rebels and the Clone Wars, Jennifer Hale, who is Ayla Secura, Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu, Ewan McGregor as Alec Guinness, Frank Oz as Yoda, Angelique Perrin, who I don't really know her, Adi Gallia from the Clone Wars, Freddie Prinze Jr., who voiced Kanan Jarrus in the Rebels show, Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn, but curiously absent from this group is Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. I thought that was really weird. Her voice was not heard in this group, and granted, she wasn't there to record dialogue, but certainly there was some line of something that she could have contributed to. I thought it was really curious that she wasn't there.
I actually have never even considered that until just now, but you're right. I'm sure there's some line of dialogue about hope or this, that, and the other thing that they could have put together. No, I agree. You're right.
She has her lightsaber in her hand, and we don't hear the voice, but not a big deal. I mean, it's a pretty impressive group of people that they did get back to do some dialogue there. And Rey uses these voices in her head to distract the Emperor from terrorizing her friends as she approaches him with a lightsaber, and Ben's lightsaber, blocking his force lightning and turning it back on him until he basically gets disintegrated rather unceremoniously. And at the same time, the Resistance takes down the command ship, which requires a last-second rescue, once again by the greatest character in these movies, the Millennium Falcon, as they swoop down to rescue Finn and company. And Finn then feels a tremor in the Force because he's now a Jedi or something, and we see Rey unconscious and apparently dead after her confrontation with Darth Sidious. Now, I'm not sure I realized that she was dead. You know, going back, I guess, after repeat watchings, it kind of feels that way, but I didn't get that initially. But then Ben emerges from the cavern and makes his way to her lifeless body, and then uses the Force to transfer his life force into hers, saving Rey, but essentially sacrificing himself. So I will say one thing that I thought Adam Driver did a fantastic job with this scene. I think he did a great job in the movie, but this scene, I think he did a really good job selling the emotion behind what was happening here. And then we get this really unexpected kiss, which really sort of took me out of the scene, because I didn't ever interpret that there was any sort of romantic tension or anything going on here. I mean, did you get that? Or
I want to say I don't know. It was weird, but I don't know why it was weird, right? Because I actually did think that they were trying to do like a romantic thing there. But then when it happened, I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, it's not as weird as Leia and Luke kissing, but it's weird, right?
yeah,
And I don't know why it was weird.
it was.
So Yeah, you're right. It was. I agree with you that I did not think Rey was dead. I'm not a fan of, and I appreciate that they set it up previously in the movie. I'm not a fan of the fact that Kylo had to die. I appreciate the fact that this was his redemption, right? He gave his life for the light side. Yeah, I can't really describe this ending after Palpatine is gone, which I agree with you. He was unceremoniously dispatched, and I don't get why these big budget movies can't kill the big bad in a better way. I mean, like Thanos literally fades to dust. Voldemort literally fades to dust. Palpatine like just kind of melts. Like they just never get the, and again, I don't know what I'm looking for, but they never get the big bad's death right, in my opinion. It just seems meh, just kind of very underwhelming. I don't know if they did this on purpose because there was more to come with Kylo and Rey. But yeah, I wasn't, maybe these couple minutes after Palpatine died just they weren't terrible, but they didn't quite hit all that well for me.
Yeah, I can see that. So we see the final order falling out of space in many toasted pieces as our heroes make their way out of Exegol. And we get shots of Bespin and Endor, which features a Wicket cameo, which is fun, and even Jakku. And our heroes get together back on their home base to celebrate as JJ retcons one of the all-time greatest Star Wars mistakes by finally giving Chewie his medal, which was the medal that Han had from A New Hope. It's a nice reunion of old and new, and I suppose it feels a little anticlimactic, but at the same time, the scene is really nice, and it's good to see Chewie get his due. But instead of rolling to the fanfare, we see Rey head to Tatooine of all places, and specifically she finds her way to Luke's old home, which I thought was really cool and interesting. And I wasn't sure where they were going with this when I was watching this, but we see her do a little exploring, perhaps in an effort to remind us of who she was before this journey began, right? So she gets on this little slide and goes down the sand and everything, and they played the same music, the same John Williams theme that he wrote for Rey. And it sort of took us back to when she was scavenging back on Jakku. And she then wraps up Luke and Leia's lightsabers and buries them into the ground, and then pulls out her own. And we get our first look at the very first yellow lightsaber, which looks to be double-bladed. I can't tell, but it looks like it is. And that would make sense because she's been carrying that staff for most of the movie. And, this whole scene may seem a bit superfluous, but it did evoke a lot of emotion for me. And I just wonder if you're sort of appreciating this the same way I do, because I think the most important thing here is that they end this movie with her looking off into the distance, sort of the same way that Luke did when he began his journey. So this was her sort of ending her journey, bookending when Luke began his journey back in A New Hope. And I don't know, maybe I'm a sucker for it, but I really like this scene. I thought it was great.
I agree. I think the scene is great. I was under the impression that her lightsaber was used pieces of her staff to build her lightsaber. I don't know if that's correct or confirmed or whatever. I would agree. I would imagine it would be a double-bladed saber just because she's been using the staff. But no, I think this was great. The fact that they brought back those musical cues from when she was kind of sliding down the AT-AT or whatever it was on Jakku. It felt, and this is the wrong word for it, but it felt juvenile. It felt like Rey was younger. It brought her back to a
innocence.
In innocent time. And I think that's what that theme to me evokes. No, I thought this was really cool. I don't know if this is actually the same set. Probably not. It's been 40 some years, but it was cool to revisit that. I'll be honest with you, I was kind of bummed to see her bury those two lightsabers, but like, what else are you going to do with them?
Sure.
But no, I thought it was cool, and the way that the movie ends with that piece of dialogue, I think is really, really, especially for what we have kind of harped on over and over, the target audience for this movie, people in their 40s that have grown up with these movies, the way this movie ends and the answer that she gives to the question of, what's your name, I think just kind of really hits us right in the feels, right? That's what this has been all about.
And then, of course, we look off into the distance and we see the Force ghosts of both Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia. And it really, bookends is the best sort of verb that I can come up with. Like, it really does a nice job of putting a bow on the package of Star Wars, like it really kind of wraps things up very nicely. And, they play the same music. And then, of course, it goes off into the credits. And, and then we have the end of the Rise of Skywalker. And that's pretty much it at that point.
Yeah, I will be honest with you. The opening night when I saw this movie, I stood up, I cheered. I had a variety of emotions going through me. This one the end of this movie felt like the end. It felt like the end of, not necessarily of Star Wars, but of the era. And I think it is. It's the end of the Skywalker saga. I think we're done with Luke's story. I think we're done with Anakin's story. I don't think we're necessarily done with Rey's story. But, I guess the question becomes, is this a good ending to this trilogy? And does this movie, if you talked about at the very beginning, if we're talking about a rubber match, was this a thumbs up or a thumbs down for this particular movie? And then I guess for the overall sequel trilogy.
Oh man, it's kind of tough. I'm not going to lie. It definitely is far from flawless. And I will say that if I had to come down on it somewhere, I think overall, I'm just glad I got something. I'm glad that we got a sequel trilogy, because for a long time, there was no reason to believe that would ever happen. So I think the fanboy inside of me is going to win the argument and say, yeah, I'm glad they did the sequel trilogy. I'm really disappointed that the second movie was so underwhelming. And the third movie is not a good movie, but I think they did the best that they could with it when you consider that JJ's coming in and Carrie Fisher is dead and Mark Hamill's character of Luke Skywalker has been killed. Like, he's got a very limited number of options that he can work with. And I think he did as good of a job as he could. I think he could have done better. I think the movie could have been shorter. I think you could have cut scenes. I think you could have re-architected some of the storylines a little bit better to make it more sense. Give some of the crappy storylines like Palpatine's return more context. But ultimately, there was just something that JJ knows how to do that Rian Johnson didn't, that made me say, I don't care how dumb this is. I'm having fun, and that's all I really care about. And that's when I walked out of this movie. That's sort of and even how many years later, that's sort of where I've landed with this. Like, I can still rewatch The Rise. I will never probably rewatch The Last Jedi ever again. I have no desire to see that. And it's really hard to sit through. This movie is not much better than The Last Jedi, but it's infinitely more fun. There's just something that I like about being a part of this story.
No, I agree. And I think it comes back to, like I said at the beginning, it comes back to The Last Jedi is just a boring movie, and it's got a boring premise. And even if it's not executed very well here, it's not boring, right? You're not waiting around for stuff to happen. You're literally going from scene to scene to scene to scene to scene, sometimes to the movie's detriment. There's too much, but it's never boring. So let me ask you a question. We have alluded to several times over this 3-movie retrospective about the Matrix and the original Matrix and the second Matrix, and I think at one point we talked about that second Matrix movie. When we walked out of that movie, we were really kind of waiting to see what the third movie would do to determine what we thought about the second one. Does this movie either positively or negatively affect your feelings on The Last Jedi?
I don't think so, just because they seem, even though it's part of a trilogy, they seem like self-contained movies to me for some reason. So I guess I don't know why, but no, I mean, I think the difference here may be the fact that I kind of like the second Matrix movie. I thought it was really good. Or maybe I liked half of it and maybe not so much the other half of it, but the remainder of the story would depend on how the third story finished it. I didn't like anything about The Last Jedi. I really didn't. And I don't want to harp on that too much because we certainly took our opportunity to do that. But this movie was sort of a different themed movie, and then it was like, hey, we're just going to forget everything. It wasn't really trying to tell a continued story. I mean, I guess it kind of did, but it had no qualms about retconning everything that second movie did. And I was okay with that because I didn't like much of what the second movie did, even if the third movie didn't do a lot of things great either. But I think it is different. And in this case, for reasons that I'm not sure I can properly verbalize, it's better. Like this experience was better.
I'm right there with you. I get that, and that's totally fair. So let's see a couple other things. Well, first of all, you had mentioned you had an alternate ending. What is that alternate? What does that look like in the world of Pip?
Well, so I've been thinking about this, and of course I haven't written the screenplay yet. I haven't really worked all this out, but one of my big hangups was this sort of magical clock that was hanging in the background to try to, set the story and give it a time frame and give it the urgency that it needed. And I thought, well, what would be a better way to do that? And I kept thinking to myself, well, it was kind of boring that Kylo or I should say Ben and Rey joined forces to battle Palpatine together at the end. And I'm like, what if they did that a little bit differently? What if Palpatine at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker said, we will attack the rest of the universe as soon as my final clone has been completed. And that was the thing that was waiting. And then at the end of the movie, when Ben and Rey confront Palpatine, out of the shadows, you hear the familiar breathing of Darth Vader. And it turns out that was the final clone. And that he comes out of the shadows, and Palpatine and Rey square off, and Vader and Ben Solo square off. As Vader's sort of the clone version of him. And of course, you'd have to retcon some other stuff. Like you'd have to go back and you'd have to really sell the fact that Kylo was really hung up on being the next Darth Vader. Like they dropped lines along the way, but it should have been more heavy-handed in that respect if they'd been planning this out from the very first movie. But how cool would it be to see? I mean, if you're going to bring Palpatine back, why not bring Vader back? And maybe Palpatine brings Vader back as like the perfect clone as his next in command. And that's what they were waiting for the whole time, is for him to be able to finish that or something. I don't know. And then it would have given them both somebody to fight at the end and given Ben a more proper redemption. Like I'm going to be Ben Solo because I was able to defeat the image of my grandfather or something like that. I don't know. I thought that would be kind of a cool idea.
No, I like that. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Vader is more machine than man, right? So it would be relatively easy to figure out a way to get him back, or some version of him. I like that.
Sure.
I think there would probably be, even though Palpatine has always been the quote big bad, at least in my mind, he hasn't been the most menacing bad guy on screen. That's always been Vader,
right?
Or at least the bad version of Vader, right?
Yeah.
So no, I like that a lot.
I think it would have been a better redemption for Kylo. I think it would have given him something more to do at the end rather than the fight the Knights of Ren, which was okay and it was cool, but to sort of give him like the ultimate challenge or the ultimate test to sort of prove himself as Ben Solo versus Kylo Ren. Maybe Vader could have said, come join me, I'm your grandfather, and Kylo could have said, fuck you, dude, and I'm gonna do this. And I don't know, it could have been fun. It could have at least given him a better excuse than we're just gonna wait 16 hours and then we're gonna launch a million ships into space, and didn't resonate as much. But I don't know, it was just kind of fan fiction rewriting that. But
no, I like that. Okay, so we're going on not quite 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
which has been amazing, by the way. I got 2 more questions for you.
All right, let's do it.
And then we can kind of wrap this up. Okay. So if we have talked now for going on 6 hours about these 3 movies, this new sequel trilogy, if you had to pick one moment or one scene out of these 3 movies that is the best, what is the best scene in the sequel trilogy?
Oh my God. One scene out of the sequel trilogy. Man, that's tough. If I'm forced to pick that one scene, I don't know. This is going to be real tough, and I might change my mind, but I think it's when Han Solo and Chewbacca stumble upon the Millennium Falcon again. That's the part in this whole series where I'm just like, bam, like my eyes are wide. I'm engaged. I'm all in this. I'm like, wherever you want to go, I'm following. That scene, I don't know if it was a good scene or if it was just like that moment, maybe, that was really great for me. I really love that. I really love the reintroduction of Han Solo back into this series. Okay.
No, that's a very fair scene. If I were to choose one scene, and again, I've talked about the couple of goosebump-inducing scenes in this movie, but believe it or not, I'm going to pick a scene from The Last Jedi, which is ironic, seeing as it's by far my least favorite of the 3. But the scene where Luke comes out and faces down the entire First Order with his laser sword, that scene to me is that 6 or 7 minutes is just that's the Jedi Master Luke Skywalker.
Yes,
that I always envisioned. Right, that's the version of Luke that we got on a little bit in Return of the Jedi, a little bit in The Mandalorian. But that's the version of Luke, even though it was a projection of him.
Yeah,
that's the version of Luke that I was always playing on the playground. Yes. Right. That's right. That was me. Right.
That was what I had envisioned when I heard they were making a new Star Wars trilogy. Like, that's the Luke Skywalker that I wanted the whole time. And we didn't get that version until the very end of the second movie, right before his death. So yes, I agree. Like that's a solid choice, because it was so easy to get wrapped up into what he was doing there, and you're like, where has this been, and why aren't you doing this like all over the place? Because that would have made for a really great movie.
Okay, then the last question is, so that we have ended now the Skywalker saga. We had the original trilogy, which I think are universally, whether you like them or which order you put them in, those are some of the 3 greatest movies in cinema history. We had the prequels, which maybe we'll do another retrospective the same way we've done here. I don't know. Candidly, I don't know that I could sit through 6 hours of conversation about the prequels, but maybe we'll get there. That's fine. And now we've had the sequel trilogy. So we've told the Skywalker saga. Should we have told the Skywalker saga? Should we have had these 3 movies? Are they good entries into Star Wars? Are we better off having them, or should we have just ended in 1983 and quit with Return of the Jedi?
Oof, man, that is really tough. From my perspective, I think it's okay that they continue to tell these stories. Like, I ultimately didn't get exactly what I wanted out of everything, but the fact that I had the opportunity to sit in the theater as a 40-something-year-old man, feeling like a 7-year-old kid, that in itself was worth everything that they did, in my opinion. Getting to buy movie tickets, getting to see Star Wars in the theater, getting excited about seeing new stories. I think the experience of that outweighed the results and some of the sloppy storytelling and exposition and what are they doing with Luke Skywalker and all that stuff. I just really enjoyed getting excited about a movie. And I had this epiphany, I think maybe right before The Force Awakens, but maybe probably the Rise of Skywalker, is that this is the most excited I'm ever going to be to see a movie for the rest of my life. You know, I had that epiphany, and it's probably true. because there is no movie franchise that means more to me as a human being than Star Wars. And to see the continuation of that franchise, one that we never thought we would ever see, was so incredibly scary, but very special and sacred to me that, yeah, I mean, in the end, I'm glad they did it. I enjoyed it overall. I think that it was worth all the effort that they made on their side, because I had a good time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Coming to these movies now as a 40-something-year-old father of 3, and being able to sit down and enjoy these movies with my children and my wife, who really hadn't seen them. This is going to sound kind of hokey, but you know, as a father, I've really enjoyed that experience to instill my love of the Star Wars universe and franchise to my kids. Do they love it the way I do? Nope, they don't. Do they enjoy them? Yes, they do. They probably enjoy them because I enjoy them. But one of the things that I've actually thought long and hard about this is this concept of, is bad Star Wars better than no Star Wars? And I've come to that absolutely, yes, bad Star Wars is better than no Star Wars. And the reason I say that is because the idea of, quote, bad Star Wars is something different to everybody. Yeah. Just because I think it's bad doesn't mean everybody thinks it's bad, right? I know there's a gang of people out there that love some of the books and some of the comics and some of the shows and the animated stuff that I don't really care for, but they absolutely love it, right? And who am I to judge what's good or bad or indifferent? Because if I were to go back and ask my parents, who were in their late 70s and 80s at this point, about the original Star Wars trilogy, they could not give two fucks about the original. Like they just don't care, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to really kind of understand that my love of this franchise is my love of this franchise. It's not everybody else's.
Yeah.
And there are other things and other movies and other stories and other periods of the Star Wars lore that other people care about that I just don't. And so, yes, we're absolutely better off having these movies. Are they exactly what I would want? Nope, they're not. But I'm glad that we got some version of the Star Wars saga.
So
I'm thrilled that we have it. Yeah.
So here's the $1 million question that I wanted to ask. Do you think we're actually done with Star Wars? Do you think it's possible that we will see another sequel or even another sequel trilogy to these movies that will include Rey, Finn, and Poe? Because they say it's the Skywalker Saga, but I personally have a hard time believing this is going to be the last time we see any of those 3 characters, especially when you consider that the movies that we just got done talking about for 6.5 hours were sequels that happened 40 years after the last one, right? So who's to say in 20, 30 years that they won't try to revisit this again?
To answer your first question, no, we are absolutely, I don't think, done with Star Wars. I don't know that it'll be any additions of this, quote, Skywalker saga. To your point, these movies were 30 and 40 years after the originals. And oh, by the way, they made $1 billion a piece. Here's the thing, folks. The mouse, known as Disney, doesn't buy a property like Star Wars and then sit on it. Yes, they have a theme park, but you know what? They're not going to roll out a theme park and spend, I don't know how many billions of dollars they spent on the theme park, let alone the property, and then just kind of let it wither and die on the vine. They need to bring on board the next generation of Star Wars fans. And the only way they're going to do that is to continue to pump out content, whether that's on, the Disney Plus network with stuff like The Mandalorian or things like the Obi-Wan Kenobi, those kind of things. But they absolutely, in my mind, are going to continue to make Star Wars content. And I think that now that we're, knock on wood, beyond COVID, you're going to start to see movies come back to the forefront. And it would not shock me if in the next 5 or 6 years, you get the announcement of another movie with Daisy Ridley and, I'm forgetting the actors' names, but those guys are under contract. You're going to see those 3 characters, Poe, Finn, and Rey. You're going to see them again, in my opinion.
Oscar Isaacs and John Boyega. Although there was some controversy, I think John Boyega was not really happy with the way they treated his character in the last movie. I agree with you. I think we will see it. I think we will see more of those stories because we are in a never say never universe when it comes to making these movies. And we know that to your point, they're not going to just sit on this. We know that there's another season of The Mandalorian that's going to come out. They're making an Ahsoka show on Disney Plus. There's going to be an Andor show, which is Cassian Andor from Rogue One. He's getting his own show coming out in 2022. Kenobi is coming out, I think, this year, right? Still, I believe it's going to be out in December. There's a Rogue Squadron movie, which is going to probably time frame be around A New Hope era, which is going to be directed by Patty Jenkins, the lady who did the Wonder Woman movies. So, I mean, they're not sitting on this stuff. It's going to keep going. And it's only a matter of time, in my opinion, before they pull Daisy Ridley back in, Oscar Isaacs or John Boyega, and do another series of movies. Maybe they won't call her Skywalker, or maybe they'll do something different. And of course, our original trilogy characters won't be involved, but I'd be shocked if we never saw them again. Like it doesn't make any sense to have movies that make that much money. And who knows where Daisy Ridley will be in 20 years or Oscar Isaacs or any of those guys. There may very well be a huge push to do that again.
Yeah, I agree. So this has been enjoyable, my friend. This is kind of what I was thinking and hoping that this podcast would turn into when we started. I'm thrilled that we have spent these last 6.5 or 7 or whatever it's going to end up being after you do your post-production wizardry on this. But thank you for taking the time. Have you given any thoughts to what our next kind of retrospective series with these super deep dives could or should be?
Man, I don't know. There's so much content out there if we really want to go into it. I will say that I'm actually looking forward to getting back to our previous formats, maybe doing a couple top 5s here and there, and maybe a 6 through 10 or something like that, and talk about some of the other stuff that we love, maybe a little break from the Star Wars universe for a little while. But I could definitely see us getting into some content, probably movie related on some level, just because those are the easy ones to take really deep dives in. Or I don't know, maybe we talk about a WrestleMania in the same sort of format or something. Like, we could get real crazy with it and still not lose a tremendous amount of our viewership. So, who knows what'll happen. But yeah, I mean, I think the sky's the limit, and I agree. This has been an absolute blast, and I've had so much fun, and it's a bit exhaustive. It's a little bit of a labor of love, if I'm being honest, but it's been magic the whole time. And I'm really happy to have had the opportunity to do it.
All right. Well, thank you again, sir. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody that has listened. Once again, this has been Chewie and my brother Pip, and this is the 411 from 406. We'll talk to you guys next time. Have a good one.
Adios.